Locho sampo pa gyu trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngoda pelge drolor zampe ze parche palde lame shabla solvade Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munish Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munishas Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munishas Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munish Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Dagi Je Tsong Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Oyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tseji Ningne Solwa Debe Tse Dejen Korlo Visu Lekshune Ila sambe deden malupa gemel hungi drupra chingelo Tsoni sokdan dikdun shakpe tse dungi namke yin so leksh Lapchen tsoni yonsu tsopa dan chera nyedun changraj Chancho parge ninsen tukun tu Nyu peme siudru lekshu ne Chancho drupe gegen kunshishi Tungen de la drupra chinge lo dage lo na chola chokpa Chumin samchur ngimba shiwa dan chedan tumbe de malupa Bemel hunge drupra chinge lo dorna tengne tsera tamche dan Techi pardo ne kab tamche tu rese kyamne lama kele me Tukje chinge dala sikso so gongyab drewe nyamta dachala Je Tsong Lame Tukje Rab Gongne Kudan Sunge Nawa Dralme Tu Nyamso Nyongwe Kesan Topra Shua Kewa Kuntu Yanda Lama Dan Drame Cheki Pela Longche Chin Sadan Lam Dorje Change Kopa Nyur Tobu Shua Pakyuke Kudan Dagi lo pakyuke sungdan dagi nga pakyuke tukdan dagi yi yerme chiktu chingi lo makyuke kudan dagi lo makyuke sungdan dagi nga Ma kyöke tukdan dagi yi Tön yerme çıktı çingi Om Muni Muni Ma Sakya Munye Svoha Sashipeke Choshimeto Tamare Rabalingashin Nidegampadi Sange Shintu Te Ulowarki Drokununam Tashin Chopar Shoyidam Guru Ratna Mindrala Kamniryata Yami Sangye Chedan Soge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapso Chi Dagi Jinso Give Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Soge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapso Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Soge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapso Chi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo alhai ke dan ludan chin ke drubundan da mi ke nam dan druba kun ke dranam chi tsampa tamche ke to dagi chöten to tamche ke to dagi chöten. Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Ripassando molto brevemente su quello che avevamo visto ieri.
Just going back quickly, what we saw yesterday. Actually, yesterday I wanted to at least have read two words from Lama Tsongkhapa. I marked them, and now we'll do that. So the first one is, here it is. There's a term in Tibetan, Nimpo Lempa. Nimpo is the essence. I think you've heard of the Heart Sutra, many of you. It's Sherab Nimpo. It's that same word. It's that same Ning. Nim is heart, which also means essence, the fundamental part. So even the translation of the Heart Sutra, which is the most common translation, but it would even be more correct to translate it as the Sutra of the Essence, but the Heart Sutra of the Perfection of Wisdom. It sounds nicer, maybe. But once we realize, and we can get out of our automatic responding, and once we realize these conditionings, being able to realize these conditionings is not obvious. So now what do I do with this life that I have? How can I take advantage of its essence? In this context, Lempo means to take, and Ning is the essence, so like taking the essence. We can also translate it as making it meaningful. So it's not an end in and of itself, or we don't live life in and of itself, for itself. So it's translated into 3 different types of objectives. How can we make this life meaningful? Take its essence. Take advantage of this opportunity we have, of this marvelous human life of leisure and endowments. So we talk about the 3 objectives, 3 levels, the 3 scopes, it's called. And then sometimes it's translated as the practitioner.
Iniziante, intermedio.
So we can talk about like a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced practitioner. So to start as a beginner, let's go back. Let's take a step backwards. We can divide our objectives of life in 3 types. We have short-term goals, we have mid-term goals, and long-term goals. These short-term goals have to do with the things that we want, and they are related to our immediate future. Normally, those are connected mostly to or what we're feeling in that moment, and we don't want to feel that resentment. We don't want to feel that sadness. That we want to continue. I want to continue with a joyful feeling, or whatever it is, connected to what we're actually feeling inside, or our perception of what's outside. We have attraction, aversion, etc. That has to do with what's around us in the immediate, and also the immediate future. So, within, for example, today I need to do this, tomorrow I need to do that, I want this, I don't want that. We're thinking about this moment of now. Next week, this week, in this close future, this near future. And normally they can be summarized as trying to obtain our objects of desire and to avoid our objects of aversion. And this is how we work. And in the middle of all of this, we need to live our lives. So we need to take our kids to school, go to work, do this, that, and the out, eat, to sleep, clean the house. These are part of this short-term objective. And then there are objectives that are related to our mid-term objectives, maybe mid-term objectives. So we're talking about our goals for the end of this life. What goals do I have that can transcend this immediate future? So they can be related to our family, for example. someone might say, whatever, no matter what happens, I want my family to stay together, to feel united, or no matter what happens, I'm going to take care of my children, or no matter what happens, I want to maintain this world view. I don't want to abandon my principles. Or maybe we buy a house thinking, this is the place where I want to spend my life. I mean, there are objectives that have to do with they can be related to the external world or our internal world, but related to our life in this life in general. And if we see that the time and energy that we dedicate, normally we spend more time and energy dedicated to our short-term goals than to our mid-term goals. Those three objectives that are described here in the Lam Rim, these are the objectives for long-term goals that go beyond this life. So generally speaking, and at this point, this first step is, how can I go beyond this life? Because it's difficult for us to have objectives that go beyond this life, because we have an identity that is linked to this life. So before going into these three objectives for the beginner and the intermediate and advanced practitioner, let's see the other two quickly, and then the path and how we can have a long-term goal. So it's very interesting is that there's nothing wrong with having short-term goals, and we can't live without them. We need to eat. We need to sleep. There are 1,000 things of our daily life that we do. But what happens is when we don't have a long-term goal, a goal for our life, the main goals of our life become the short-term ones. When we have a goal that is for this lifetime, those short-term goals become they serve the long-term, the mid-term goals for this life. So I need to get up early to go to work because I want to buy a house. I need a place that will be comfortable and secure where I can spend the rest of my life. But to do that, to achieve that goal, I need to I need to do things now. I need to find a certain type of work. I need to get up early. I need to go to work. I need to take out a mortgage, and I can't leave my job because I can't not pay my mortgage. So even, just for that, so many things need to happen. We need to do so much for that to happen. So these short-term goals become even more important once they're not an end in of themselves, but they exist as a tool to serve something that transcends that short term, a goal that is more long term. And the same thing happens when we have a long term goal that goes beyond this life, that transcends this life. It doesn't mean that we're abandoning this life, having such a goal. It means that we have short-term and long-term goals that exist to be at the service of a longer goal for next life. I was thinking as to whether open this argument, this subject or not. I recently was reading a book that talked about communication, information, some political aspects. It didn't have anything to do with the spiritual aspects, but there was something interesting that had me reflect. It was something written by a general, a military general. I didn't pay attention to his name, so I didn't retain his name. But this general said that any military action taken by a country, it needs to be evaluated for not as a military intervention in and of itself, but it needs to be evaluated as to whether it has a higher objective, if it's going to be successful or not. So anything that's done in a short term, for it to be useful, it needs to be it needs to match, it needs to be in harmony with a higher objective. On the political realm, I mean, a country has a political agenda, has a view of what it wants to realize, and the military intervention can be or not a tool that takes that country to that view. I'm absolutely against. I didn't mean to talk, we're not talking about military inventions. Violence is something that's always harmful. That's another topic. But he was saying how difficult it is to find a higher objective and lose ourselves among the short-term goals. It's easy to have a short-term goal, win the battle, show how strong we are, but why? Why was that done? And let's talk on a micro level. Oh, I went and I fought with that person, and now what? But I was right. Okay, you proved that you were right, but that served what purpose? For example, in a relationship with someone else, I try to set a midterm goal to carry out that relationship in a loving, harmonious, respectful way. So, crossing, underlying that I was right about something, if that helps this longer goal for this friendship, for this relationship, then okay. Otherwise, we don't need it. It's important for us to ask ourselves in our relationships, for example, with our parents, with our friends, our co-workers, our children, what midterm goals do I have with you in this life? Looking further. Maybe I don't have any. Maybe I'm used to living my life just reacting to situations. But once I set an objective, that allows me to act accordingly. And here I make the distinction between we live a life where our present is a simple reaction of the past, so we react in the present with the result of the past, or instead where we can live this present moment as a cause for the future that I want to create, where the things that I do are not a reaction of what has been, but they're a knowing action, causes for the future. So let's start first of all with the importance of direction for the direction that we want to give to our life that transcends this present moment. If we're able to give a direction that goes towards the end of our life, that's already a good sign. I mean, we're really just at the beginning of our spiritual path, where there are 3 necessary levels. The first one requires not just mid-term goals, but goals that go beyond this life, which doesn't mean to abandon this life, but we have goals that are so deep that they go beyond this life, but that makes this life and the goals that I have for this life so important because they serve my highest goal. I mean, I can have so many different types of goals. I can have a goal to for the health of the environment, or try to change my worldview. And what I do is works at the service of this higher goal. So how can we distinguish between a mid-term goal and a long-term goal? How can we even create a long-term goal that goes beyond this life? The objectives that go beyond this life they're called they have to do with spiritual goals. So we in Tibetan we use the word Ch, which means Dharma, or means so many different things. But in this particular context, we're talking about spirituality. So if something is part of if something is spiritual, we can determine what is spiritual or not based on whether it is at the service of this life or beyond this life. For example, I mean, what are the things that are really only of this life? Money, wealth. Yesterday we saw these are things that we cannot take with us after death. Our body, we can't bring it with us. Our name, our image, our social position, etc. We can't take these things with us. So it means to have a long-term goal that transcends this life, it needs to go beyond our wealth, our material goods, our body, our position, our images, our name, etc. So our inner being, on a coarse part, the information, our knowledge, the information we have, most of that we don't take with us. I say most because what we have created a deep familiarity with, we take that with us as being as like a predisposition. For example, for me, there are certain subjects, certain things that were incredibly easy for me to learn, and my feeling was I was remembering more than learning. The Tibetan language, for example, many aspects of the Dharma, and there's many other subjects that are very difficult for me to learn. And this shows me there's certain things that I am attuned to. I have this predisposition, and other things not. There's some that have this for sport, for music, for art, and that's not my case for any of those. Instead, others, have this predisposition for philosophy, etc. And this just means that in the past that we familiarized ourselves with one thing or another. It said that someone who lies a lot is used to it so much, then he brings with him this predisposition to do that in this life and then also in future lives. Someone who meditates often and deeply dies and then brings with him also this predisposition.
Quindi anche dal punto di vista concettuale,
So even on a conceptual level, we can't actually bring them. And these predispositions that we have, they're not just the conceptual things, but mostly on an emotional state. For example, anger, our inner way of living the world, jealousy, gratitude, love, etc. So, what aspects transcend the various situations that we face in our lifetime? And to understand this better, let's just take a couple steps back, or better. How many lives have we lived within this life? I'm speaking metaphorically. Looking at myself, I'd say this is about my 5th lifetime. There are moments where I can say there was a before and an after. People that I thought I would, or I was going to spend the rest of my life with them, and then things change, and I don't see them anymore. Or situations that I thought would last for forever, and then things change and they're not there anymore. So I think that's happened to everyone. So we have more lives within this life. So my first life was up to 12 years old. I usually have about cycles about 12 years. It's just quite regular. So up to 12 years, I lived in Brazil, and then the next 12 in India. So at a certain point, my whole life changed. But what I experienced in that first 12 years of life, the way those experiences shaped my personality and my being, my character, they determined how I lived the next life, the next cycle. Both traumas and also the qualities I developed, I brought all of that with me, and through that I lived that next life, and then it ended, that third life. Change context, people change. So I left India, and then I came to live in Italy. Everything changed. I mean, not everything, but so much from one day to the next. But what I lived in those years, I brought with me, and I have that with me still today. So there's a part that transcends each phase, each life, that continues. In other words, the experiences begin and they end, but we keep going. We continue.
Perciò,
so
esiste un aspetto
there's one aspect of is facing a situation. You do something else. Another aspect is how I live that situation and how that situation transforms me inside. If I live a situation with a lot of resentment and anger, once the situation is finished, that anger and resentment keeps going. If I leave a situation with gratitude and joy, I'm familiarizing myself with joy and gratitude, and that joy and gratitude continue even after the situation's ended. So that's why the first thing, I think it's fundamental for us to generate this awareness that there's this external reality where there are the meetings and facts and things we do. I study here, I live, I'm doing this and that. Okay, there are external factors. And then there's an inner reality, how I'm living what I'm living, what feelings I have, what awareness, etc. The first objective, the first midterm objective that's important for us to have, it is an inner objective. If I think about here to 50 years' time, if I think about myself at 94 years old, everybody, let's imagine ourselves old, if far. Maybe someone is maybe someone is already a little older. Well, think about yourself at 120. Really, who do I want to be? Or 104. So I have no certainty of how my body will be. Maybe it'll be horrible. Maybe there'll be scientific changes, and instead my body will be in great shape. I don't know. Materially, how my situation is going to be, I have no idea. How will the world be around me? We just see how quickly things are changing now. I mean, can anybody describe what the world is going to be like between now and 5 years' time? I mean, you can imagine 50 years. What changes there will be. But there's something I'm absolutely sure about that I can really count on. If I develop more patience, I will have more patience regardless of how the world will be, regardless of the company I keep. So awareness, gratitude, love, and I want to be a satisfied person, a joyous person, a loving person, compassionate, stable person, harmonious and wise. I want to be a person like that. So the first point is setting an objective, an inner objective for the end of this life, a midterm. So given that I want to be a balanced, satisfied and joyous person, regardless of where I'll be and what will happen, okay, in this present moment, there's someone treating me badly. What am I going to do? Our tendency is that when someone treats us with violence, even more, if we have this strong feeling that it's that we're right and someone is treating us unfairly with lies, what would our tendency be? To react. You treat me with aggressively. You shouldn't do it because that's something that's wrong. And because you treat me with aggression, and you shouldn't because it's wrong, that allows me to treat you with aggression. I mean, we're very strange, aren't we? Instead, what I want to be a respectful, loving, patient, joyous person. Treat me with aggression, you go against me, I breathe. And I ask myself, I mean, who do I want to be? I want to be a joyous person. So how am I going to manage? I'm going to react with love and respect and joy. I act in this present moment what I want to be tomorrow, and I don't go into that reaction. What upholds that action is having that midterm goal. This changes everything. But what's the problem? When we create a midterm goal, okay, I want to be a peaceful, joyous person, but it's a conceptual concept. And I see this very often. Very often, we have dreams, but we don't believe in them. No, it would be beautiful to live in a peaceful world, but that's just not going to happen. I mean, it's too much work on my side. I'd like to be a satisfied person, balanced person, but that's just too much effort. So I'm not going to put in effort, and I'm not going to work. I'm not going to put in any work now. It's very important for us to give a real priority to these inner objectives that are these midterm objectives, where our short-term objectives should be lived as a means to realize those midterm goals. I want to live in peace, so I need to live my daily life as a tool to support my midterm goals. I want to have a healthy body. I need to adapt my lifestyle in this present moment so it supports that midterm goal. I want to have a relationship with you that's based on trust and respect and love. So it means that now in this present moment, I need to act with trust and love, etc. Even if I feel like I want to do it differently. There's an expression that a saying I've heard from this Italian actor. He said, when someone seemingly doesn't deserve to be loved, that's when they need to be loved. So when someone treats us with violence or aggression, and it's difficult to be loving and kind and compassionate with someone who's treating us with aggression, but that's when that person needs love the most. And so when we have something marvelous, which is freedom, I mean, the real freedom is not found, I mean, that's also freedom, but there are different levels. I mean, there's the freedom of movement, the freedom of expression, and there's the freedom of voting, etc. But there's also an inner freedom of being able to act instead of react. The only person who can force force me to feel anger and hatred is myself. The only person who can keep me from loving you or anyone else is myself. No one can actually do that if not myself. Anyway, let's set a midterm objective. And if we're able to have this sincerely, we've already done a lot, because these inner objectives that are midterm objectives, this is the basis for a long-term objective. But how can we transcend objectives of this life and open ourselves up for others? What lever is really going to help us make this passage? It's our dear friend death. Saint Francis called it sister death. So I don't know, friend, sister. For me, a brother. I don't know. Death doesn't have a gender. But when I find myself faced with death, first of all, what is death? Is it the end of everything, or is it a passage? I mean, the answer really needs to come from deep within. Personally, since I was very, very small, I always had the total certainty that after death, there's reincarnation. Even as a very, very small child, I was about 2 or 3 years old. It was one of my first topics of conversation, and this idea that one died and one continues. It was very clear for me, and I think for many of us, it's not so special. I I mean, I think it's quite common. But if I have the total awareness, the certainty that death is when this body doesn't support life as we know it, and there's a part of ourselves that leaves this body, and this part of ourselves continues and takes another existence, a different existence in a new place, on this planet, or or heaven, or a hell, or purgatory, or whatever view there is. I mean, regardless of what that place is, there's continuity, there's continuation. And once I continue and I see I have this life, and I don't know how many years are ahead of me or how much time is ahead of me, and then I see what's coming after death, what weighs more, what's happening now, maybe a week, 10 months, 50 years, I don't know. I don't know how much more time I have. Maybe we live to be 120 years old. And everybody, do the math yourselves. And you put that on one side of the scale. And then after death, you put the symbol, the infinity symbol, because everything that comes after, I mean, what weighs more? What comes after? And it's strange how difficult it is for us to accept this, really. It's really difficult to give priority to that mid-term goal instead of the short-term goal, and create a long-term goal in looking at the mid-term goal. And it's not just about today. I mean, Buddha Shakyamuni talked about this, and all the masters talked about this, that we need to generate an objective that transcends this life. I mean, Buddha Shakyamuni and all masters. But to do this, the first thing we need to do is we need to recall death, because once I'm able to generate a non-conceptual awareness that I'm going to die, and I have no idea when that actually will happen, and I ask myself what I'm leaving for others and what I'm taking with me, and I already set an objective that transcends this life. And at that point, I go back to my short term and I ask myself, what am I doing to cultivate what I want to take with me, and prepare for what I want to leave to others. So that awareness of death really helps us prioritize. Say, okay, I need to face a daily living, but I can't pretend that I'm not going to die and not take care of what's going to continue. To get to this awareness, though, I think it's important to get to this awareness that this inner reality exists, and it's more important than our external reality, even in this present moment, and how I live all situations now is going to determine also the future. That means taking responsibility for things and living accordingly, because we're going to die soon, and we don't have time to waste with envy and jealousy because he said, she said. Come on, we've understood. Sometimes, because it's a habit. All right, that habit comes, you just let it pass, but don't give it any weight. We don't have time to waste with jealousy and envy and resentment. soon we're going to die.
E se non moriamo subito,
And if we don't die right away, we're going to be cultivating all of that stuff. If that's even worse. So we don't have time to waste cultivating aspects that we don't want to take with us. We need to cultivate what we want to take with us. When we have a little bit of awareness with this and we see beyond this life, sincerely what I see is that what's after death, of which I have certainty, is uncertainty. Where will I be? What's going to happen? How it will be? I don't know. Recently, I was with our Sangha friend, Dottoressa Charo. She had been in a coma, and then I met her the day she came out of her coma, and then a week later, she was already able to speak, and she said, I was really curious to see about this this death process. She had studied. She's studied a lot, or spent her most of her life around this, and she was really curious to see what was going to happen, and what really is there behind the around the corner of death. But so she was curious. So we have very clear teachings. We have very clear descriptions of what happens after death. And today I'll just touch on this view. But actually, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow in a world where, in a world that theoretically I'm able. I know things. I know the laws of physics. If you drop something, it falls. I know. But what's actually going to happen tomorrow? Is anybody sure? Anybody know? Is anybody sure about what's going to happen tomorrow? No. So how can I feel sure about my future when I have no certainty of what's going to happen? The only real way is to rest on the things that we can be sure of, our own inner characteristics that will allow us to live in one way or another. I can trust my patience, my stability, my awareness, etc. I can trust that come what may, I'll be there with my resources. And so if I trust these resources, then I have the means to face anything, beautiful things and negative things. So I don't trust an imaginary reality where everything's going to be fine. Instead, I trust my own ability, my inner ability to face what's going to happen. And in this way, I find stability. I don't know after my death what's going to happen, but I know that there's a coherence between how I live my life today and what I'm going to experience later. There's a coherence between the habits that I create and the predispositions that I will have tomorrow. There's coherence, there's a connection. There's a coherence between the connection I create with the people today and the connections, relationships I'm going to have tomorrow. So today I try to live with the greatest amount of, I try to live accordingly, according to what I want for my future. And here, the small scope begins here. This objective for beginners is where I try to live this life with coherence in relation to what I want after my death. And I want to have a good rebirth. I want to be reborn in a healthy place. I want to be well. I don't want to be in a vicious cycle. I don't want to enter into a vicious cycle. I'm not going to open this argument now. becomes too long, and then there'll be time to talk about it. So, I mean, what is a vicious cycle? Let me just explain what I mean quickly. If I find myself in a situation where there's a lot of suffering and a lot of violence, what's our tendency if we find ourselves hungry and in a violent area, full of violence? Are we able to cultivate love, or do we enter into a vicious cycle? I live suffering. I react with anger and hatred and aggression, creating other causes to experience that suffering. And it doesn't have to be infinite, but it can last a long time, this kind of vicious cycle. So one priority I have, one of the priority I have is after my death, I have to absolutely need to avoid being reborn in this negative vicious cycle. Be born instead with the conditions to generate even more love, more patience, etc. So this first small scope is to have the objective of having a good rebirth. And it's interesting, and it's one of the next one of the next subjects after impermanence is the law of karma, where yeah, it's not the next one. There's impermanence and then karma. If I want to have a good future, I need to live in the present moment well. So if I want to assure myself a good rebirth, what should I do? It's like, as I said before. So I act in this life. I'm not reacting to that aggression of someone else because I don't want to create a relationship of anger and hatred or resentment with that person, but also because I don't want to bring with me that negative karmic force. I don't want to bring with me those feelings of hatred and anger, and which are causes of entering into a vicious cycle of suffering. So I try to act today with as much coherence as possible, of what will give me as much a security of a positive future rebirth. Instead, the middle scope is where one says, okay, well, it's great to be reborn to have a good rebirth, but that doesn't give me the actual certainty to be well. So just and we'll get into details later, but just in a few words, that middle scope is what one looks towards oneself and says, no, actually what I really want is to get out of samsara and the cycle of suffering. Because as long as my body and my mind are polluted by mental defilements and karma, no matter where I go, sooner or later I'll suffer. So I want to totally get out of this cycle of suffering. I want to eliminate totally my ignorance and my selfishness, anger, attachment, jealousy, and envy, etc. And the great scope is where I look around me and I see that I'm not alone. I see that others are in the same situation as me, and so I generate empathy towards them. I'm able to see myself in others. I generate love and compassion towards others. So I expand that desire to get out of suffering and to be well. I expand that feeling to others, and I generate a state of altruism where my objective is no longer getting out of samsara, but my objective is wanting that every being be free from suffering. So I need to develop my qualities to be of service to them. And this is the great scope, the great objective. It's not because we say small scope that it's tiny. It's already a lot. And to get to the great scope, first of all, we need to generate that middle scope, and before that, we need to generate that small scope. How can I say? The beginner practitioner scope. If I want to get to the third floor, I need to go to the first and the second floor. Now we're not even in the building. We need to call the elevator. So getting into the building is already a lot, and that's already good. And to do that, we need to pass from short and to mid and long-term goals, and external goals to inner goals, internal goals. And one tool that helps us take that first step is the awareness of our own death. So I'm just going to read this text by Lama Tsong Khapa. As I said before, this book seems enormous, but it's printed very large. Someone says, "Oh, we have to read all of that," but this is the Lam Rim text written by Lama Tsong Khapa and a disciple of mine in Tibet, Lobsang. And the last time I was in Tibet, he gifted me this book that he had printed in an ancient way, where every page is printed from a wood block, printed by hand, and it was printed by the monks in the Ganden Monastery, the Ganden Monastery founded by Lama Tsong Khapa in Tibet. And he said, when you give the Lam Rim teachings, please use this book. And I took the commitment, and that's why I always bring it here. And here, very quickly, Lama Tsong Khapa says, the next point, the first point is recognizing the opportunity of this life of leisure and endowments, and the second is how to make this life meaningful. And here there are 3 points. We develop the small and the middle and the great scope. The being a beginner and a middling and a advanced being. So for the beginner practitioners, it's divided also into 3 parts. Familiarizing ourselves with the small scope. When is the scope generated? And here, just eliminating some doubts that can come up. The first is divide up, it's into 2. So generate the desire of the mind, generating the mind that transcends this life, and the method to do so. The first one, how to generate the mind that transcends, that desires what transcends this life. The first point is reflecting on the fact that this life is not long and soon we're going to die. And the second reflection is recalling that once we die, there will be different possibilities of where we're going to be reborn. But these possibilities, and here they're seen quite in detail, they're divided into 2 types mainly. There are certain types of rebirth where one is a little bit better, and others where one is the worst. So generate this awareness that I know that I will have to die, and what's going to happen after? And start looking at these possibilities. And then, okay, we say, okay, this one I don't want, this one I don't want, this one I don't want, I don't want this one. And because I want, how do I get to that one? And here we get to the method to cultivate of joy and the wellness, beyond this life. Here, the first, it has 4 points. So the benefits of recalling one's own death or mortality, and the disadvantages of not being aware of one's death, and the advantages of being aware, and how to generate this mind of awareness of one's own death, and how to meditate on the certainty of death and the certainty of the uncertainty of the moment of death. So it's what we saw yesterday. To meditate, what we're going to do, let's remember that to meditate means to familiarize oneself. So either we need to live very, very strong experiences that take us to an awareness of our own mortality on a non-conceptual level, but that's very delicate to induce these kinds of experiences. It's not the case to do so. When it happens, but you don't need to look for them. And from a point of view more mental, one starts with a mental process, and just asking oneself, am I going to die or not? Yes, death is certain. When will I die? I have no idea. But we go back to these questions, these points, see, what's the answer? Or ask ourselves, why should I not die today? And debate with yourself. Could I die today? The answer, just from dentro, what answer comes from inside? No, tomorrow I have things to do. I think most of the people who have died up to today had something to do the next day. But somewhere, no, today I can't die. Why not? And let's really try to look for reasons. And then we see that we don't have a valid reason, a real reason, that would make us absolutely sure that today is not the day that we die. One of my masters, Ken Lakpala, he told me that when he was a child, around 6, 8 years old, and he would think about death often. And he would go to the mom, and the mom says, "You're gonna die. I'm gonna die." He was just fixated. He said, "We need to do something," and she would answer like this: "Oh, my child, don't worry. Don't worry. After a while, these thoughts pass." And he says, unfortunately, she was right. As we grow, and we convince ourselves more and more that we're immortal within our own mortality. As we touched on yesterday, it's a mechanism of self-defense, actually, to live our daily life with a minimum amount of balance and harmony. Somehow, there's a part of our mind that says, "Oh, everything's fine, everything's going to go fine." When instead we generate this awareness of death in this context, it doesn't mean that we live in paranoid. It It's about living with the awareness that we can't waste this present moment. Because the conclusion of a healthy conclusion of this awareness of death is that we need to live every moment to the best of the best we can. We meet someone, and no matter where we are, we have no certainty that we're going to see that person again. There was the monastery of Sera. There was a road when you arrive, and then and it was quite steep. And when you get to the very right at the bottom, there's like a 90-degree turn. It really is quite dangerous. And there was a sign that said, "Go slowly. Be careful. Dangerous curve. Dangerous turn." And it says it's better. And someone wrote, "It's better to arrive 15 minutes late in this life instead of 15 minutes early in the next." We don't know, but if I'm here with you and I don't know if I'm going to be able to see you tomorrow, what's the consequence of that? I ask forgiveness where I need to ask forgiveness. I try to live this moment in the best way possible, cultivate what's really important, to enjoy this present moment as much as possible. And I've always tried, if someone is sick, maybe death seems closer, more certain, but but I ask myself, why is an old person with a sickness more sure to die than a young, healthy person? Someone says, "Oh, soon this person's going to die. What am I going to do?" Just enjoy this present moment. Be together joyously. Give value to every moment. Give value to every moment. Be well together. The result of this recall of our own death is living this present moment well. We don't have time to waste on stupid things, for quarrels or for meaningless things. Let's take care of what's really important. I go somewhere, I enjoy it to the fullest. I meet someone, I try to live that in the best way possible. If I don't see you again, I have no regret. The real awareness of death brings us to the end of the day. We see what we've lived, the things that went well, wonderful. The things that didn't go so well. We need to clean our consciousness with the things that didn't go well. Make sure that we also ask forgiveness where we need to. It's one of the most beautiful awarenesses that we can have. Yesterday we talked a lot about this. I don't want to go on too much longer, but it's too important to ignore. And now we've said so many times we're made of habits, and one of the first steps, or let's say the first necessary step to have an objective that transcends this life, is creating this habit of awareness, being able to recall our own death. Lama Michel Rinpoche, for example, he told me once when he came to the West at the very beginning, at the beginning of the 1980s, and he lived for a year and a half in Switzerland, where among the Tibetan community mostly. And he came from India, where it was materially very poor. There were his masters and friends. And what he did is every week the 2 or 3, the little bit of money that he was able to save, the offerings he would receive from ceremonies and pujas. Every week he would go to the post office and he would send money, and he would divide it always among His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Kyabche Sori Rinpoche, Kyabche Chida Rinpoche, and we had a list of all these great masters, and he would always send them. Even when he was traveling, he would always send the money before traveling. And I would say, why? Because I don't know. I never know when I'm going to die. I don't want to die with my pockets full. So I send the money first. So even if he wasn't really sure that he'd be able to arrive, the money at least, his offerings were there. Even all those years, the years that I was with Lama Ganchen, I always saw him that he had total awareness that he could die at any moment without fear, but he was living every moment to the best of his, to the fullest. And it doesn't have to do only with death. For example, different example, Lama Ganchen every year went to Borobudur, this holy place, and many of us went with him. It seemed like we were going to do that forever. And one day, the conditions changed. And today, to do what we were able to do in the past is practically impossible. It's possible to go there, but with a large group, not so much. And then every year we would go to Tibet every year. It seemed like that was going to be forever too. And then it was the last year. Things change constantly. But there are moments where there are greater changes, and then that reality can no longer be sustained. And it's like that for everything. I remember very clearly the day that in front of the house, I sprained my ankle, and I didn't walk well for months. There's a before and an after. Luckily, I was able to heal from that. It took about a year, but we never know. Or when I received a diagnosis for an eye illness, it's stable. It's years now that I see that it's stable. It's not dangerous. I'll just tell you all now because there are some who listen with a little bit of paranoia. But when I received that diagnosis, and I saw that also my auntie, who's already left her body, she had 2 times received this transplant because she had this same sickness. And for a moment, I looked at myself, and it's not so. It's not so obvious that we can see, well, I can't take this for granted. And I said, how wonderful. And I started imagining what it would be like if I couldn't see anymore. And just seeing gave me tremendous joy. I said, I need to take advantage. I need to read a lot because we don't know what's going to happen. Also, but even on a very banal level, there's so... if you're living a moment with a lot of joy and happiness with someone, enjoy it. At some point there'll be the challenge of conflict, and you'll have to put more effort. I mean, that's normal. So impermanence is part of life. Things things change constantly. They transform constantly. And when we live in the awareness of the constant transformation without living this impermanent reality as being permanent, that allows us to live to live better what is, and cultivate really what we want without living in the fear and the paranoia of what's going to end. We can really take advantage of it when we're aware of its impermanent nature.
Avevo detto,
I had said the last was just last thing. So how do we meditate on this? Because the real problem is we talk a lot for hours talking about the same thing. Try to move something inside, because the objective is not to understand. I mean, if the objective was just to understand, we we would need 5 minutes. We would say, "Are you sure that you're going to die?" Yes. Do you know when? No. There's not much else to say about that. But since we need to generate this inner feeling, so that from this information from our head starts to come down, we need to repeat, 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 repeat. I can spend all day long saying repeat until that is part of our being, and it's not a concept that we heard and we understood, but it's something that's really a part of ourselves. And for that, we need to familiarize ourselves with this. And this is valid for the entire part of the graduated path to elimination. In Tibetan, it said,
or
tu sam gomsum. Tupa means to listen. Sampa is understand, and Gompa is to familiarize. And there are the 3 levels of wisdom. So there's the wisdom of listening, the wisdom of understanding, and the wisdom of familiarizing ourselves. When have we realized the wisdom of listening, and we don't need any more information? We've finished that step. So we've received the information, or we've read, we've acquired information in that listening part. We realize the wisdom of the listening, of the certainty of death and the certainty of the uncertainty of the moment of death. Once, when we develop a correct assumption. So this certainty is conceptual still, and it's not upheld neither by a direct experience or by our own correct logical process. Of everything in my head, I've heard this and it seems like it makes sense, but it's still superficial. And someone says tomorrow that you can actually be immortal in this body, and we say, "Oh, really?" So somehow we don't even need that. We just stop talking about, maybe even after, after a few minutes, then we forget that we have to die. So when that information instead, that concept, is no longer something that someone told us, but something that I am totally sure of, that's when I've completed that. No matter who tells me differently, I don't believe it, because I have I have clarity. So when it becomes mine, that's the process of understanding. So about death, for example, it's no longer what Lama said or what Buddha taught or what's written in the Lam Rim. No, I know that I'm going to die. A Buddha can even change his idea. I'm not going to change my idea. So even Lama could come and say, "Well, it's not true that we're actually going to die." No, don't take me for a ride. I have my own certainty. This is the that second passage of comprehension, and the third is the wisdom of familiarization, this process of repeating that awareness again and again until one is able to, one has that realization, when that realization is actually spontaneous, and we don't need to induce that and that awareness. So the certainty of one's mortality and the certainty of the uncertainty of the time of death, that is present in everything we do, in every moment of our lives. It's something that's part of our being. That's when we've realized the wisdom of familiarization. So the longest passage is not the listening and it's not the understanding, but it's actually the familiarization. So how can we familiarize ourselves with something? By repeating it over and over again. Not the concept, but that state of consciousness. We need to induce again and again that inner state of consciousness, that certainty of death, the certainty of the uncertainty of time of death, until we create more and more familiarity with this. And this means meditating on death. The meditation on death is not, how can I say? It's not about reflecting on the meaning of death. What we need to familiarize ourselves with, the familiarize ourselves is a more correct term. It's not on meditating on the concept of death, but the total awareness and the certainty of mortality, of our dying, and not knowing when. And one way is when we sit down, we breathe, we take refuge, possibly we do the preliminary practices, we request blessings. As we've explained at the beginning of the Lam Rim, we talked about the preliminary practices, and then we start with an analytical meditation on the fact, on the certainty of death. So we ask ourselves, am I going to die or not? And we give ourselves all the reasons why we will die. When instead? I don't know. Why do I not know? And we give all the answers that support that I don't know, until we get to a conclusion, an inner state. This conclusion, we feel it deep within, like I'm going to die and I don't know when, and that feeling brings this urgency to wanting to live life well. But when we have that awareness of our death and uncertainty of the moment of death, when we are able to generate that feeling, we set it aside and we breathe again, and we imagine any kind of situation in our life, at work, with our family, whatever it is. We observe the situation and we see, how does life appear, as if we were mortal or immortal. And we see that there's this appearance of immortality, that we live as if we were supposed to live forever. And even we bring that concept of death, oh, okay, but not now. It'll be a tomorrow that we, an undefined tomorrow. But then we bring back that non-analytical conclusion that we had, that feeling. We apply that, so that in front of that appearance of I'm not going to die today, we apply that certainty. That's that certainty of that feeling of certainty of our own death and the certainty of the uncertainty of that moment. And then we try to stay in that state where it's no longer an inner dialogue, it's a feeling, and we stay in that state of consciousness. I rest my mind in that state for as long as I can. And in this way, I'm familiarizing myself with that. I'm meditating on the certainty of death and on the certainty of the uncertainty of the moment of death. And the result of this is not the fear of dying, but it's the fear of not living our life well, and the desire to wanting to live it well. If you do this really well, what's a sign that you're doing it well? You want to enjoy every moment, to hug the people you love, to thank everyone for nice things, ask for forgiveness where necessary. Every moment, every day becomes worthy, valuable. And we don't take things for granted. And we need to repeat this process again and again until it's more present, and so it's always present with us, even when we're not thinking about it. For example, there was a period in Tibet, in India too, to remember one's mortality and the uncertainty of the time. Instead of using a spoon, they would use like a rib. They would, as a sign to recall the impermanence and death. And what's important is to remember. They can use many different methods. And the point is not to live it as something heavy, but to give value to everything. 1 year, for example, lived with awareness, one can do so much more and live so much more compared to 10 years without that kind of awareness. A year lived with presence is worth more than 10 years without that kind of awareness. I mean, time is really relative, but let's bring this awareness to our life. Yesterday I had said, so we conclude this part, and yesterday I had said that we would explain the death process related also to Bardo and rebirth. I can explain this based on what I've learned, but not on what I have a direct experience with. But in Tibet, in Buddhist teachings, there's a lot of coherence. What happens after death. So let's try to give a brief explanation of this. But it's important to have a view where we understand, okay, what is death, what comes after. Even simply imagining the day, the word death, what image comes to you? I mean, if you look on the internet and you type in death, what kind of images come out? Are they beautiful images? Normally it's something heavy, ugly. And for me, death, when I think of the word death, I see a bright sky, a warm glow, a warm light, because our concept of death matters. So this brings us to another type of meditation where we simulate our death to create familiarity with this process, so that we will be able to recognize it. what's in the state that we die with is incredibly important, because the body and consequently the gross mind loses strength when we die in the diet process. Remember, even before that, body and mind always go together. I'm convinced that body and mind are two aspects of the same reality. It's impossible to separate them. So what happens in the gross body falls has a consequence on the coarse mind, and vice versa. What happens on the subtle mind has its correspondence to the subtle body, and vice versa, and that's true also for the very subtle body and mind. At death, what continues after death is the very subtle mind and body. Like an energy, it's described as a subtle wind, a subtle prana, a very subtle energy. So there's also the mind, which is a non-conceptual mind, a non-emotional mind. It's a state of the mind where there's no attraction, there's no aversion, there are no emotions or no thoughts. There's only these imprints, these predispositions that we bring with us, and imprints. But this state of awareness, quote unquote, on the very subtle level of the body. So the direction that the very subtle mind takes is determined by the last is determined by the very subtle mind, which is determined by the coarse mind. So at the dying process, in the death process, each from the coarse to the subtle to the very subtle. So the coarse loses force, and then this very subtle it can be seen. It becomes more evident. For example, if we make a lot of noise here, children crying or someone using an electric drill, and then we also have someone who's whispering a mantra, or one's own breathing, or the sound of one's own heartbeat. Can we hear the whisper in the middle of all this noise? No. But when those louder noises stop, those softer noises become more and more obvious, evident. And actually, what happens if we go into a place where there's no echo and no external sound? Is there absolute silence? What do we start to hear? Our own breathing, the sound of our heart beating. There's also a sound. It's said one can actually hear the sounds of one's inside body. Microsoft created a room actually that has a specific name. I can't remember it. Where there's zero external noise or echo, and the world record for being able to stay inside is like 40-something minutes. No one's able to stay in it because you start hearing sounds that you've never heard before. They're very, very loud because our senses, the more gross that external object is, the sensitivity of that of that sense is the weaker it is. You know, if you eat spicy food, and after a while you can't taste anything else, and our mind is the same. For example, we have a mind that is mostly taken by sense objects and a very strong conceptual mind, sense perception. When that gross mind loses effort and the 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 more subtle parts of our body become more evident. And when that subtle part loses strength, then the very subtle part becomes self-evident. And this is what happens in the death process, in the dying process. It's said that, as we said yesterday, so earth dissolves into water. Remember, when we say it's not a real dissolves, but it would be, let's say that earth loses strength and water becomes more evident. But in Tibetan we use the verb dissolves. But it's not a real dissolves into. So earth dissolves into water, water dissolves into fire, and fire dissolves into wind, and wind dissolves into the space of consciousness. And in this process, we gradually lose our five senses, and the same thing then happens with the same thing happens when we fall asleep. How many times has it happened that you've fallen asleep when you didn't want to fall asleep? It's happened to me a couple times driving, actually, and luckily it were 2 times where I was absolutely exhausted, and a part saying, no, I can't sleep, I can't sleep. What's the first part that starts to abandon us, our eyesight, and then one just lets go. Happened to me once nearby at night. Luckily, in both times the car was actually stopped, and it wasn't dangerous. But that adrenaline then wakes you up. Now I don't drive if I'm too tired. But what happens is, in that moment, when that earth element starts dissolving, what are the main signs? The body becomes heavy. You don't have that strength anymore. You can't keep your eyes open. One little by little starts disconnecting oneself from the outside world. It becomes further away and less important, until we can't keep our eyes open anymore. And then there's that feeling of weakness, even the hands. For example, if I'm holding something in my hand and at a certain point I fall asleep, it's going to fall. Einstein, for example, he thought that he had these moments of intuition, and he said that these best moments of intuition was when he was like half sleeping, half awake. And so if he needed to find some kind of key intuition, he would put himself, he would get something in his hand, and something that would make noise. And then, so he would, in that state of almost falling asleep, apparently is when he had his best intuition. So he would set himself up with keeping something in his hand, and then when the body would starting to fall asleep, would lose the strength in the hand, and he would drop something, it would make noise, and it would wake him up. So this is a dissolution of the earth. Normally in the dying process, or in the falling asleep, this awareness of the first 2 elements. I mean, we can be aware of these first 2, and then afterwards it's very difficult to have the awareness of the rest. For earth, it's quite easy. And when sounds start becoming farther away, and we start losing interest in what's outside, even sensations start falling away. Has it ever happened? Have you ever fallen asleep with pain? Yes, no? Yes, right? Unfortunately, I had this long period where every night I had a lot of pain in my shoulder. So even if you're feeling that pain and it's difficult, when you start falling asleep from fatigue, it's as if that pain is just farther and farther away, and at a certain point, you don't feel it anymore. Maybe you even wake up during the night with pain, but as you're falling asleep, it's as if you don't have that pain anymore. When water dissolves into fire, we lose this perception of feeling of pleasure or pain. And as we fall asleep, we can experience that. The same happens in the dying process. And I really was, I thought, when I saw this with the dying process, so that second passage, when you can't move your body anymore, when the body starts drying up a little bit, when you lose this ability to hear things, and you also lose the sensation. And it was, for me, it was a great relief, because that means that the person who is dying is no longer in a great state of suffering or joy. That suffering is no longer there. And the experience of the one dying is much different than the person watching the person die. So these sensations, you know, get weaker and weaker, and so that's a great relief. So when one starts breathing badly, the one who's living that dying process from inside doesn't have that clarity, not living it in the same way from outside. When from outside, we think that the person's living with that same awareness that we have, as if they were conscious and awake, and the experience is absolutely different, totally different. Like someone who's falling asleep, between falling asleep and a deep dream. I mean, that experience of reality is much different than someone who's awake. And the same thing happens with the dying process. So earth dissolves into water, water into fire, and fire dissolves into wind. And the body starts becoming cold. First the extremities, and the heart for last. We lose the ability to discern this is that, that is that. We forget names or lose names, and that conceptual part of the mind weakens and weakens. And then the last phase is the wind. The wind dissolves into the space of consciousness, and the dying person stops breathing. So the inhale is longer than the exhale. I don't know if anybody's seen someone dying. If we accompany someone dying, there's a moment where there's this particular breathing. It's a little bit strange. But the one who's inside, it's totally different. And as wind starts dissolving, that inner sensation that's losing is a correlation. What's lost is contact with the external world, and the same thing happens when we fall asleep. So with falling asleep, we can say that the person is completely asleep, I mean, there are different levels of sleep, but when one has a gross level dream, so that would be the dissolution of a wind into the space of consciousness. And then we get to a deeper sleep, or the subtle sleep process that is similar to the subtle death process. It's said that one can't have a dream until one has gotten to a deeper level of sleep. And we can make this comparison. So when you start dreaming, that's when you've completed the dissolution of the subtle when you've the subtle part. So there we have a white, a red, a black vision. So there's also we talk about the clear light of dream. Here we're talking on a very, very advanced level. Okay, we're not on the third floor anymore. This is much higher. But there's this comparison. There's this objective to be totally aware in our lifetime of the falling asleep process, where you recognize, okay, the earth elements dissolving, I'm losing, this, and then the senses that follow, until one is able to get to the awareness of the clear light of sleep and the awareness of the dream. And then dream and know that you're dreaming. I've only known one person in my life who talked to me about this as if it were something totally normal. A Lama that I studied with. He entered the monastery when he was only 3. He had an ability to memorize that was just frightening. He had many, many qualities. And one day talking to him, just chatting, we started talking about dreams, and he said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He said, he was just a boy. For me, it's absolutely normal. I've always been like this. So I fall asleep like this. I'm falling asleep. Then I have fallen asleep. I start dreaming. I'm dreaming. I need to wake up, and I wake up, and then I'm awake. He never loses the awareness. I said, that is not common. You read in certain texts that that's possible, but it's really for very, very few. It shows an enormous predisposition for this. I mean, this is something that he brought with him, and he talked about it as if it were normal. No, it's not really like that. Not so normal. But what's the key in this case? To be able to direct our mind in a virtuous way when we fall asleep, to dream in a positive way, familiarize ourselves with this positive state, and wake up also in a positive state. There's the dream, the sleep yoga, so we want to use our sleep for spiritual development. And there are other things we could add here, but now it's not the right time to talk about this. When we dream, one characteristics of dreaming, other than being connected mostly to what one lived through the day, when one wakes up wakes up from a dream. So like if I dream of being in Mongolia, it can happen that we dream about being like a Mongolian boy or girl. In a dream, everything's possible. But if I'm a young girl in Mongolia, I dream of being that. I mean, that reality just creates immediately. I don't have to grow up in my dream and then be a girl. So in one night, how many dreams can we have? One? More than one? More than one. More than 20? Fewer than 20? From our experience, probably less, fewer than 20. It's actually said that normally one could have 7 could have a maximum of 7 different dreams within one sleep. If you wake up many times and you fall back asleep, then maybe you can have as many as 20 or whatever. Every dream that finishes is one reality that ends, and then a new reality begins. When we die, what happens in this process? I mean, so the gross body loses, it weakens, and then the subtle body becomes more evident, and then that one weakens, and the very subtle body becomes self-evident. And the same thing for the mind. So the mind, the subtle mind follows the coarse mind's dissolution, and then the direction of the subtle mind gives the direction for the very subtle mind. So this very subtle mind becomes self-evident at the moment that the indestructible drop opens. And so the body, the very subtle mind and body become self-evident, a self-awareness, but it's not conceptual and it's not emotional, but there is this level of self-awareness on a very subtle level. This is called the clear light. This is an enormous opportunity. Why is this an enormous opportunity? I'm really trying to summarize things here, but I actually need to explain. Has it ever happened that you've wanted to eliminate a thought? Right? And what happens? Okay, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to think about this. That doesn't work. If there's a boy or a girl, if there's a store and says, "Oh, mommy, I want this, mommy, I want that," and you don't want to buy that, what's the technique? What's the best technique? Look at that other thing. You distract. We don't have this ability of thinking about two things that are opposite at the same time. So if we have a thought that we want to, and we want to eliminate that thought, we need to generate an opposite thought. If my thought is I don't like water, what thought do I need to generate to eliminate the thought that I don't like water? I like water. Any thought that we do have, to eliminate that thought, we need to do that. We need to generate the opposite, direct opposite. If I have something that I want to overcome on a gross level, I need to generate a coarse antidote. If it's a concept, I need to generate the opposite concept. If it's a deep emotion, the opposite. So to find its opposite, I need to develop that emotion on that same level, on a deeper level. No matter how much I say I want to generate love for this person, but inside me I have this hatred, once I'm able to feel, not think, but feel love for that person, once I feel love for that person, can I also feel hate in that same moment? Maybe one right after the other, yes, but not at the same time. We're so used to having this feeling of hatred, and then we feel love, and then the anger comes back. And to eliminate any mental state, we need to generate familiarity with the opposite so coarse for coarse, subtle for subtle, and very subtle for very subtle. The root of our suffering, I will not get into the details, so we'll see this later, but the root of our suffering is not the world around us, but the way we live that world. And the primary cause of suffering is our obsession with self-gratification, our self-centeredness, our selfishness, and then there's fear and envy and all these 20 mental defilements that they're caused from this obsession with self-gratification, which is caused actually this the ignorance of seeing the world as being objective and of inherent existence, and we grasp at that appearance without getting into detail. So how can I eliminate the root of suffering, which is the non-conceptual mind, the spontaneous, subtle, and very subtle mind that grasps at reality as if it were of inherent existence? I need to generate the mind that realizes the lack of such intrinsic existence on a very subtle level. So if I'm able to generate this feeling of love and altruism on a very subtle level, I'm able to oppose my selfishness on a very subtle level. Generally speaking, imagine land where there are many layers, and to get to a deeper level, normally I need to water, and then that water little by little comes down. Normally, to make a change on a subtle and very subtle level, to make that imprint on a very subtle level, we need to work a lot on that gross level. We need to repeat it, and little by little it changes the subtle levels, and then make changes also on the very subtle level. But these are very long processes. And there's another problem too. I dedicate those few hours, that short time, to generate a state of altruism, and when I'm not in that state of consciousness, when I'm not consciously in that state of altruism, then I go back to my selfish state. So the influence that I can actually have on a very subtle level is limited. At the time of death, instead, what's on top, if it wets, it wouldn't even be enough. I mean, the amount of water that we need to pour, the water, let's say that these experiences, I mean, I need to repeat an experience so many times, so that little by little that water can penetrate and go deeper and deeper. At the time of death, what happens is that water at the top, that the earth, it just disappears, and then we have the deeper levels, so that water can water that subtle level, and then that subtle level disappears, and then we're right away at the very subtle level. So at the time of death, it's an opportunity, an incredible opportunity, the best opportunity of our entire life to transform our being, very deeply. So if I die with hatred, what am I going to familiarize myself on a very deep level? If I die with love, I'm familiarizing myself on a very deep level with love. And this is one reason why a spiritual practice within Buddhism waits his whole life and waits for death as a great opportunity. So it's very, very important to generate a virtuous state in front of when we're facing our death. This helps us familiarize ourselves with that state. And a more advanced level, one's able, before dying, one can enter to a state, it's called the absolute bodhicitta, state of love, an altruistic state, with which one is able to realize non-conceptually the nature of things as being interdependent and empty of intrinsic existence. It's the union of wisdom and method. This is our highest objective. One generates this virtuous state and stays in that state when one dies. This brings this virtuous state from a coarse to a subtle state, and staying in that state until it gets to the where you're able to and then that goes to the very subtle state of the clear light. Yesterday, when I talked to you about the practitioners who are able to stay in this meditative state of the clear light after the dying process, technically speaking, according to our medical system, these people are dead. But normally, when someone normally dies, how much time goes by from death to a rigor mortis? I mean, not very long. I've seen people who've died, and very soon after you see that when you stay in this meditative state of clear light instead, that dying process is not totally concluded, and the signs are there's the body's actual complexion is still bright. There's no decomposing of the body, and there's a light heat around the heart of the body, and there's also a fragrant smell. So that person is in a meditative state that started before dying of love and wisdom, and stays in that non-conceptual meditative state on a very subtle level. That person is transforming himself towards a state of wisdom and compassion in an extremely subtle extremely subtle and deep transformation. So maybe one needs, in those 2 hours, one can do, in 2 hours, one does what would take 80 years to do, for example. That's why we say it's the greatest opportunity is dying. There, in the lifetime, we have sleep, and they say also that orgasm, where in these two times, there are also these absorption of the winds, where the mind enters into these states of consciousness. The orgasm, we're talking about when we're talking about nanoseconds, but the point is in falling asleep, and also through sex and death, this inner state of the inner state that I live these experiences is how I'm going to familiarize my mind on a deeper level. So if my mind is absorbed in attachment, then I'm familiarizing myself with attachment. If it's love, then we familiarize ourselves more with love. So it's important to, especially with absolutely with the death process, we need to familiarize ourselves with virtuous minds. If we're near someone who is dying, who is in this cycle, the most important thing to do is to help this person generate inner states of virtue, virtuous minds. This can be by coming into contact someone in the family with whom there was a great feeling of love, or maybe a religious figure close to the family. I remember telling I remember telling someone who was dying, said, leave your body in the hands of the doctors. They know what they're doing, and leave your soul to Jesus. When someone can, whatever that bridge is, to take that person to a state of trust and love, that's what that person needs now. And there are visualizations, there's so many methods, but it's not like saying, no, this is the mantra that you need to recite when you're dying, and this is the key. It's not that visualization that you need to. I mean, if you don't have any connection with that or with the Buddha, or maybe I have even a trauma related to such a figure. Maybe I maybe like Rohingya in Burma, many Buddhist
fuori dal mondo.
I mean,
Una persona che magari ha vissuto quello e uno in nome di Buddha è venuto lì a uccidere la sua famiglia. Nel momento della morte.
There were these Buddhists, they did horrible things were done in the name of, no, it's not the image that's going to resolve anything. So this object of faith, so that this object of faith to induce these states of love and gratitude and faith and peace, this is what a dying person needs. This object of faith, whatever it is, so that I can live that. So I can live that at the moment of my death. I need to experience that, live that before, so that I have this hook. This relationship with the Guru, for example, among many other things, it has this function. The relationship with your yidam, your tutelary deity, has this function as well. But the point is, if I need to help someone with this in this dying process, first of all, I need to allow myself to see that person, understand how the person's living, and then I can try to help, try to find this object of faith or this bridge, so that we can help them generate this virtuous state of consciousness. And this is there are two aspects. First, it creates a deeper imprint that we just explained, and then this inner state that one dies with becomes the condition at the time of actual death, at the clear light, when one is about to actually leave this body. This inner state is the condition to ripen a type of cause or another. To understand this well, we need to talk about the law of karma in very, very few words. What happens is this. It's always the together of the present and the past. So in my present moment, we talk about the conditions, their inner conditions and their external conditions. The inner conditions are my mental state, my emotional state, and my physical state in this present moment. And the external conditions are the objects that I interact with, the environment, the people, situations. The inner conditions and external conditions interact with the causes that we've created in the past, the actions that we've done, and also our predispositions that we've created, this karmic inertia, this karmic force from the past, which is nothing other than the actions that we've already done, but that have finished, but have this energy that has come with them. Like many seeds that have, these causes are the seeds that were planted in the soil. So we have the conditions of the present and the causes of the past. It's impossible to experience the present disconnected from our past. So, in the moment of death, there are no more external conditions because we're not in contact with external conditions. Our senses are no longer working. There are no more external conditions. So what's the main condition is the inner state. So it's the inner state in that specific moment of death is the result is the result of our inner state of being at the beginning of the dying process. So according to how we find ourselves, we end up ripening one karmic seed or not. It's similar to how we're falling asleep. I mean, we have one type of dream or another, and after lunch we'll talk more about karma. There's something I want to say. Here we see the power of words and the danger of words said badly. There's a prayer for the Bardo that we've recited many times. It says, since Tibetan prayer. So normally we do first with Om Mani Padme Hum and then with this prayer. In 1987, Rinpoche transmitted it, and it was translated as, "O assembly of glorious divinities, the peaceful and wrathful, please listen, protect me from the frightful and narrow passage of the Bardo." And here's a very bad translation. So it's different saying, "Protect me from the frightening narrow passage of the Dharma," or "Protect me from a frightening and narrow passage of the Bardo." It's like saying, I ask for oh, please protect me from a bad dream. It's different if I say, protect me from, protect me from bad dreams, or like that dreaming is bad. So anyway, it gives the idea that Bardo it has to be something negative, and that's not true. The Bardo is extremely similar to a dream. It's a mental experience created, or you're not aware, but it is possible to be aware. But normally one's not aware that one is in the Bardo. And it's like a dream. At a certain point, you create another reality. It can be beautiful, it can be negative, it can be neutral, or it can have positive aspects, negative aspects. This reality of the Bardo, we can have small Bardos. You can die in the Bardo and be reborn again in the Bardo. It's called the small death. For a maximum of 7 Bardos before being reborn in a body, and then we'll take it back up quickly. So the point is, we need to die well. The more I'm able to die well, the greater my certainty of continuing well. It's like a chain. I die well. I enter into the dying process well with virtuous mind. I die well. That creates a condition to mature, to ripen something positive. So I have a positive, virtuous Bardo, and that brings me naturally to have a virtuous, positive rebirth, because the inner experience of the Bardo is the condition. There are external conditions also in the Bardo, but So when one has that little death, and then before being reborn in a physical body, that small death is the condition for that next birth. So technically, we are totally free where we want to be reborn. But if I invited each one of you to come here, if I invited each one of you to come here and I said, okay, just here among these three tails, you choose one object. Are we all going to choose the same thing? Well, I mean, we're free to choose what we want, but we're not free from what? Our own conditionings, our attachment, our aversions, the conditions in which we find ourselves. If I'm very thirsty, what am I going to choose? Probably here, there's a glass of water. According to the condition in which I find myself, and that conditions my choice. In the Bardo, technically speaking, we're free to choose. There's nothing that forces us to choose one way or the other, but we're conditioned by the dream of the Bardo, that reality. We're conditioned by our fears, by our ignorance, by our attachments, etc., etc. Okay? So when we talk about the freedom of choice to be reborn, we talk about someone who's been able to overcome one's mental defilements, one's ignorance, and one can actually make a decision free and not conditioned by one's mental defilements. But the key for us is to live well, to die well, to have a good Bardo, to be reborn well. And there's a coherence here, and it's possible to do that. I'd say that for the death process, we don't need to get into any more details. Today after lunch, I'd like to finish quickly this explanation of the Bardo and rebirth, and talk quickly about how to deal with other people's dying. This is important. I mean, not only we will die, but other people will die too. So what are the things that we can do to face the death of those close to us? So what we can do during and after. There are small things that can really help us. I mean, there's no key, like do this, it'll be perfect, but there are many things that we can do that will be very helpful. This is not something that is normally treated at this part of the Lam Rim, but since this is something that's very important to all of us, since we've touched on this beautiful topic of death, I'd say let's discuss it a little more deeply. Now we'll be so we'll stop now for lunch. It'll be a little shorter. We'll have the teachings start again at 3 o'clock to 5. So now there's time for everyone to have lunch, have a good lunch, and so I won't be receiving anyone now, but I will receive you after the teachings at 5.
Tempe drume sasum ki Drowe munsela takto ne gyur che nimo dele tsendele nime kunyan dele kshin ninsen takto dele kpe kuncho sumke chingelo kuncho sumke ngodrubo sol kuncho sumke trascisho. Un'ultima cosa prima.
Oh, just one more thing before we stop, otherwise I'll forget. Excuse me. When we see death, for example, in the context of a war, we say, and we evaluate the situation based on how many people have died. The real problem is not that the people have died, but it's that it's a system of violence and a cycle of it's a vicious cycle of suffering. So 60,000, 1,000 people of dying people. These are people who died in a state of fear, violence, hatred, which is so much worse than just dying. 60,000 people died in a state of peace. Okay, I mean, without taking anything away from the value of life. But the problem isn't about that someone has died. It's that there's this cycle of this vicious cycle of violence and suffering involves also the ones who kill, and not only the ones who die. We see the amount of suffering that is created in this vicious cycle of war, of both killers and those killed. So let's make a final dedication written by Lama Tsong Khapa. I'll make an improvised translation. It's at the end of my book. There's this dedication. My book, Where Are You Going in Such a Hurry? It says, you can repeat after me.
Gyalkam thamchetu mine chukne seser tempada mage muge guba kunshishin tsering neme deki dembarsho. In tutti I paesi di questo vasto mondo,
in all of the places of this vast world,
possono tutte le malattie degli umani,
may all the sicknesses of humans,
le malattie degli animali,
the sicknesses of animals,
I disastri naturali,
the world calamities,
la povertà,
the poverty and conflicts, wars,
essere pacificati.
be pacified.
E possano tutti gli esseri
And may all beings
avere una lunga vita,
have a long life,
piena di gioia,
full of joy,
soddisfazione
satisfaction,
e pace.
and peace.
Nimo dele tsendele, nime kunyan dele kshin, ninsen takto dele kpe, kuncho sumki chingilo, kuncho sumki ngodrubut sol, kuncho sumki trashisho. All'alba,
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
at dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and spring all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Oma hun tempa lame sangye rinpoche, kyopa lame tamcho rinpoche, trimpa lame gendo rinpoche, kyamne kuncho sumla chopa. Buon appetito.
Have a good lunch. And we'll come back at 3 o'clock for teaching.